Fox Theater, Detroit, 1956. Frank Sinatra was singing My Way when a scream from the audience froze the entire hall. A desperate mother had thrown her sick baby onto the stage, crying, "Hear me! My baby is dying." Faced with this dramatic moment, Frank's response not only changed that baby's fate, but also transformed the destiny of hundreds of sick children in Detroit. If you're ready to discover how one moment of compassion can create a movement that saves thousands of lives, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell, because this story will show you the night Frank Sinatra proved that true stardom means using your platform to heal the world. Let's dive into the performance that started with music and ended with miracles. November 18, 1956. Detroit, Michigan was a city caught between hope and despair. The automobile industry was booming, bringing prosperity to many families, but the city's medical infrastructure was crumbling under the weight of rapid population growth. Detroit's hospitals were overcrowded, understaffed, and struggling to provide adequate care for the growing number of families moving to the Motor City for work. The Fox Theater, Detroit's crown jewel of entertainment venues, stood as a beacon of glamour and escapism in the midst of these urban challenges. Tonight, the theater's 5,000 seats were completely sold out for Frank Sinatra's performance, part of his triumphant return tour following his career resurrection. Frank was at the absolute peak of his comeback. His Academy Award win, his chart-topping records, and his legendary performances had established him as more than just an entertainer. He was a cultural phenomenon. But what made Frank different from other stars was his genuine connection to working-class audiences. He understood struggle because he had lived it. Among the audience that night was Dorothy Williams, a 23-year-old factory worker who had saved for 3 months to afford a ticket to Frank's show. Dorothy worked double shifts at the Ford River Rouge plant, sending most of her earnings to support her elderly parents in Alabama. But she had one treasure that meant more to her than anything else in the world: her 6-month-old son, Michael. Michael Williams had been born with a severe heart defect called tetralogy of Fallot, a complex condition that left his tiny heart unable to pump blood effectively. In 1956, pediatric cardiac surgery was in its infancy, and the specialized care Michael needed was available in only a handful of hospitals across the entire United States. Dorothy had spent the past 6 months fighting a losing battle with Detroit's medical system. Doctor after doctor had told her the same thing: Michael's condition was too severe for the limited surgical options available locally, and the few specialists who might be able to help were too expensive for a working-class single mother to afford. The Cleveland Clinic had pioneered some experimental procedures for children like Michael, but the cost was astronomical, nearly $15,000, more than Dorothy could earn in 5 years. Even with her factory insurance, the coverage was minimal for what doctors considered experimental surgery. Dorothy had tried everything. She had written letters to medical foundations, applied for charity care, even considered taking out loans that would have bankrupted her family for generations. Every avenue had led to the same dead end. Her baby was going to die because she couldn't afford to save him. Michael's condition was deteriorating rapidly. His lips and fingernails had turned blue from lack of oxygen. His breathing was labored, and he rarely had the energy to cry anymore. The local doctors had given Dorothy a timeline she couldn't bear to accept. Michael had perhaps weeks left to live. That's why Dorothy had spent her last savings on a ticket to Frank Sinatra's show. Not because she expected a miracle, but because she needed one last moment of beauty and hope before losing everything that mattered to her. She had left Michael with her neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, promising to be home before midnight. But at the last minute, Mrs. Patterson had called to say Michael was having trouble breathing and Dorothy needed to come home immediately. Dorothy faced an impossible choice: rush home to comfort her dying baby, or stay for the concert she had sacrificed so much to attend. In desperation, Dorothy had made a decision that went against every rule of propriety and common sense. She had gone home, picked up Michael, and brought him to the theater. Her plan was simple: if this was going to be one of her last nights with her son, they would spend it together, listening to the music that had always brought her comfort. What Dorothy didn't plan was what would happen when Michael's condition worsened during the show, and her desperation overcame her judgment in a moment that would change both their lives forever. Frank Sinatra took the stage at the Fox Theater at 8:30 p.m. to thunderous applause from the capacity crowd. He looked magnificent in his tailored black tuxedo, his blue eyes sparkling under the stage lights. The opening number, "Come Fly With Me," brought the house down, with the audience singing along to every word. For the first hour, the performance was vintage Sinatra, smooth, confident, and magical. Frank moved through his repertoire with ease, his voice in perfect form, his stage presence commanding every corner of the massive theater. The audience was completely captivated, lost in the spell that only Frank could weave. Dorothy Williams sat in the upper balcony, holding Michael carefully in her arms. For the first time in weeks, she felt a moment of peace. The music washed over her, and for brief moments, she could forget about doctors and bills and impossible choices. Michael seemed to be responding to the music too, his breathing slightly more relaxed than it had been in days. But as Frank began his signature song, My Way, Michael's condition suddenly took a turn for the worse. His breathing became rapid and shallow, his skin took on an alarming blue tinge, and his tiny body began convulsing slightly. Dorothy realized with horror that her baby was having a serious cardiac episode, right there in the theater. Panic consumed her rational thinking. She was too far from the exits to get Michael to a hospital quickly, and she knew from experience that Detroit's emergency rooms were overwhelmed and ill-equipped to handle his complex condition. In her desperation, she felt like she was watching her baby die in her arms while beautiful music played in the background. That's when Dorothy Williams made a decision that defied logic, propriety, and every social norm of 1956 America. She stood up in the balcony, began pushing through the crowd toward the front of the theater, and started screaming for help. "My baby is dying," she cried out, her voice cutting through Frank's performance. "Please, somebody help my baby." Frank stopped singing mid-verse as Dorothy's desperate cries reached the stage. The entire theater fell silent, 5,000 people turning to see what was happening. Frank shielded his eyes from the stage lights, trying to locate the source of the commotion. Dorothy, now at the edge of the balcony, held Michael up so Frank could see him. "He's dying," she screamed. "The doctors can't help him. Please, you're the only one who can help." Security guards were already moving toward Dorothy, preparing to escort her from the theater for disrupting the performance. The audience was buzzing with confusion and annoyance. They had paid good money to see Frank Sinatra, not to witness someone's personal crisis. But Frank did something that shocked everyone in the theater. Instead of signaling security to remove Dorothy, instead of continuing with his song, instead of treating this as just another disruption, Frank walked to the very front of the stage and spoke directly to the desperate mother. "Ma'am," Frank called out, his voice carrying clearly through the theater's acoustics, "what's your baby's name?" Dorothy was stunned by the question. She had expected to be removed, ignored, or treated as a crazy person. She hadn't expected Frank Sinatra to engage with her directly. "Michael," she called back, her voice breaking. "His name is Michael, and he's dying of a heart condition. The doctors say they can't help him here." Frank nodded slowly, processing what he was hearing. "Dorothy, bring Michael down here to the stage." The request sent a shock wave through the theater. Frank was inviting a disrupting audience member onto the stage during his performance. This was unprecedented in the world of professional entertainment. Security guards looked confused, unsure whether to follow their protocol or Frank's instructions. Frank made the decision for them. "Let her through," Frank commanded with the authority of someone who owned the venue. "Bring that baby down here right now." What happened next would become one of the most legendary moments in entertainment history, not because of the music performed, but because of the humanity displayed. As Dorothy made her way down to the stage, carrying her dying baby, Frank did something that revealed the true measure of his character. He didn't just offer sympathy or empty encouragement. He took action. "Ladies and gentlemen," Frank announced to the still-silent theater, "we have a baby here who needs our help. Michael Williams has a heart condition that requires surgery his family can't afford. Tonight we're going to change that." Frank gestured for Dorothy to join him on stage. As she climbed up, still holding Michael, Frank could see the desperation in her eyes and the alarming blue tinge of the baby's skin. This wasn't a publicity stunt or a dramatic plea for attention. This was a real medical emergency happening in real time. "Dorothy," Frank said gently, "tell everyone here what Michael needs." Dorothy, overwhelmed by finding herself on stage in front of 5,000 people, struggled to find words. "He needs surgery. At the Cleveland Clinic. They can fix his heart, but it costs $15,000. I work at Ford, but I can't. I'll never be able to afford it." Frank turned to face the audience. $15,000 to save a baby's life. "Ladies and gentlemen, I know times are tough for working families, but tonight we're going to prove that when people come together, miracles can happen." Frank pulled out his own wallet and removed a wad of bills, his payment for the evening's performance. "I'm starting this fund with $5,000, he announced, placing the money in Dorothy's hands. The gesture electrified the theater. This wasn't just charity, this was Frank Sinatra giving away his entire night's earnings to save a stranger's baby. But Frank wasn't finished with the most important part of his plan. "Now," Frank continued, "I need everyone in this theater to look at little Michael Williams. Look at his mother Dorothy, who works double shifts to try to save her son's life. And I need you to ask yourselves, what is a life worth?" Frank paused, letting his words sink in before delivering the challenge that would transform the evening. "I'm not asking anyone to give more than they can afford. But I am asking everyone to give something. $1, $5, whatever you can spare. Because when 5,000 people come together for one baby, that baby doesn't stand a chance of not surviving." What happened next was unprecedented in the history of live entertainment. The entire theater began digging into their pockets, purses, and wallets. People were pulling out bills, coins, jewelry, anything of value they could contribute to Michael's surgery fund. But Frank had an even bigger surprise in store. As the impromptu collection began, Frank made an announcement that stunned everyone, including his own management team. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'm also making some phone calls tonight. There are doctors, hospitals, and medical foundations that owe me favors. By tomorrow morning, Michael Williams is going to have the best pediatric cardiac team in the country working on his case, and this family is going to have all the support they need." Frank was using his celebrity connections not for personal gain, but to mobilize an entire network of medical professionals on behalf of a baby he had met 5 minutes earlier. The collection continued for nearly an hour. Theater staff brought baskets to gather contributions, and the amount grew beyond anyone's expectations. But more importantly, Frank had turned a concert into a community mobilization effort that would have lasting effects far beyond one family's crisis. As the evening progressed, Frank did something else that would cement this night in legend. He didn't just return to his regular performance. Instead, he turned the rest of the concert into a celebration of what people could accomplish when they worked together for good. "Michael," Frank said, gently touching the baby's hand, "you're going to grow up knowing that 5,000 strangers in Detroit loved you enough to save your life. And Dorothy, you're going to know that you're not alone in this world." The final count from that night's collection was $18,000, more than enough to cover Michael's surgery and ongoing care. But the money was just the beginning of what Frank's intervention accomplished. True to his word, Frank spent the following weeks making calls and leveraging his connections. Within a month, Michael Williams was being treated by the leading pediatric cardiac team at the Cleveland Clinic, with all expenses covered not just by the theater collection, but by a network of medical professionals and foundations that Frank had personally contacted. The surgery was successful. Michael's heart was repaired, and he went on to live a normal, healthy life. But the ripple effects of that night in Detroit extended far beyond one family's salvation. Frank's public display of immediate, practical charity inspired similar efforts across the country. Other entertainers began dedicating portions of their performances to local causes. The concept of benefit concerts became more common and more effective. More importantly, Frank had demonstrated a new model of celebrity responsibility. He had shown that fame and platform could be used not just for personal enrichment, but for solving real problems in real time. Dorothy Williams returned to her job at Ford, but her life was forever changed by more than just her son's survival. The community support she had experienced gave her the confidence to become an advocate for other families facing similar medical crises. She eventually started a foundation to help working-class families navigate the complex world of pediatric medicine. Michael Williams grew up knowing the story of the night Frank Sinatra saved his life. He became a doctor himself, specializing in pediatric cardiology, dedicating his career to helping children with the same condition that nearly killed him as a baby. Frank continued to receive updates on Michael's progress throughout his life. Every Christmas, the Williams family sent Frank a photo and a letter updating him on Michael's achievements. When Michael graduated from medical school, Frank was there in the audience, tears streaming down his face as the young man he had helped save walked across the stage to receive his diploma. The Fox Theater in Detroit installed a plaque commemorating the night that a concert became a miracle. It reads, "On November 18, 1956, Frank Sinatra proved that the greatest performances happen when art serves humanity." This incredible story shows us that true greatness isn't measured by talent alone, but by how we use our gifts to help others when they need it most. Frank Sinatra could have had security remove Dorothy Williams and continued with his show. Instead, he chose to see a mother's desperation as an opportunity to demonstrate what human beings can accomplish when they work together. When you face moments where someone needs help that seems beyond your ability to provide, remember Frank's lesson from that Detroit stage. Sometimes the most important thing you can do is use whatever platform you have, no matter how big or small, to connect people who need help with people who can provide it? How can we all be more willing to interrupt our plans when someone needs urgent help? What would happen if we treated every cry for assistance as an opportunity to create miracles? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story inspired you to think differently about using your influence for good, hit that like button and share it with someone who might need this reminder that we all have the power to save lives when we work together. Subscribe and ring that notification bell because we have more incredible stories that prove the greatest performances happen when we choose compassion over convenience. Until next time, remember, your platform, no matter how small, can be someone else's lifeline.